Okay. For some of you, this is probably going to be a repeat, but most guys don't listen anyways, so it's always like the first time when you tell a guy something. One of the biggest challenges of this generation, in the relationship world, is not just meeting the right person and getting there, and getting married and finding the person who you really feel like you're compatible with, but it's actually maintaining it after you meet them. That's like the bigger challenge. The meeting part, it's not easy, but eventually, sooner or later, it happens. What's harder is really making it work. Building what's called a functional, healthy, long-lasting relationship. Because, if you just meet someone and you start a life together, that's great, but what happens 10 years later? What happens 20 years later? It's very hard to think that you build something and that you invest something and your whole life can actually one day flip around, and it's like you see all of the investment of your life in your marriage, in your relationship, almost disappear. And in that place, there's something very hurtful and negative, right? So what I'm talking about, what I want to start it about, the discussion about, is this phenomenon that we see so much outside, at least I see it because I'm exposed to it in different ways in people's lives, is that you see people who are like living, married, in love, you could say even, or whatever, having a loving relationship, and then that love suddenly could be short, maybe 3 years, it could be 4 years, 5 years, it could be 10 years, it could be even 20 years. They say that the threshold is 15 years. It's very interesting that if you pass the 15-year benchmark, then it's like the chances are less. But it's getting to that 15 years. I don't know what it is about 15 years, because I've also heard it about Baal Tshuvas. People who become Baal Tshuva, sometimes they, just like you say in Hebrew, there's Chozer b'tshuva, and then there's Chozer b'she'ela. There's a person who, it's a revolving. Also 15 years, they say. I don't know what it is about the 15 years. But in any case, you see it all too often that people who are in a relationship with kids or without kids, it doesn't matter. What was once love turns to almost like hate, right? And so the question I have for you guys is it possible that love can turn to hate? It's a scary thought, because this is like the closest person in your life suddenly becomes against you, your enemy almost, so to speak. Right? Is it possible? It's something very discouraging, right? Because you feel unsafe. Wait a second, how do I know this is going to work? Some of the best relationships, right? So this is the question. Is it possible that love can turn into hate? Or do we say that maybe, based on what happens later, we can say that there was never love there to begin with? What do you think of the song? Now over here, you're gonna be called upon.
I don't know. I kind of think. No, I think it can. I think they could have done something or there could have been a circumstance that kind of made them fall out of love or something like that.
So you're saying it's possible that at one point they did, something happened, and it changed everything.
Yeah.
Interesting. What are you, Sharona?
It's interesting because, I do define love as something to be unconditional, meaning you just accept them fully for whatever they are and whatever they do. You accept that and you adore that. And I think hate is a very strong word. So to go from one to the next.
When I say hate, it doesn't mean that you wish that they get hit by a bus.
Okay.
But you can't stand them And not only that, the sight of them makes you they're a source.
definitely possible.
They're a source of like misery in your life.
I think it's possible, yeah.
Okay, it is possible. So
Yeah, I mean, I feel like isn't that why people get divorced?
of course it is. Does anyone want to add anything before I give the final this bang and tell you guys that you're totally wrong? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
A lot of times, if I may,
Yeah.
a lot of times people who are at the beginning fall in love with the idea of falling in love, fall in love with lust, fall in love with the romance of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, everybody's in that honeymoon stage and everybody behaves and it's fun to go out and to do this and go out and enjoy yourselves, and you fall in love with the idea of falling in love. And then when reality hits, when blank hits the fan and
It pops.
pops and finances come into play, kids come into play, parents come into play, in-laws come into play, and reality.
You mention the in-laws. It's a very interesting point. You know that
it's a main factor,
one of the reasons why we
especially for this father,
Yeah.
if I may, because in-laws are involved in every factor. You not only marry your spouse, you marry your in-laws.
Oh, okay, that would be a nightmare. There's one of the things that we
reality.
in many communities it is. Actually on that note, there's a blessing that we say under the chuppah where we bless the bride and groom that they should be like Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. They should be as happy. Why? Because they didn't have in-laws, right?
Yeah, I thought about it. They didn't have in-laws. They were
What?
lucky.
They didn't.
I mean, they didn't have in-laws.
No in-laws.
Until the mother snake came.
Yeah. So, in answer to this question, it's very interesting. What you guys said is true in some sense, but I think one of the most common reasons, and when we talk about love, is we have to distinguish between two types of love. What's called selfish love and real love. And the reason why we have to separate them is because this concept of love is so obscure that people use it loosely. People say, I love you, and they could be like just saying, I love you, but they don't even know what this word means, right? The selfish definition, the first definition of love, selfish love, is the love I think that most people probably fall into. And that's what's called, like when you ask a kid, what do you love to eat? And he says, I love pizza. He doesn't love the pizza, right? He'll throw the pizza away. He doesn't build a pizza, something nice for the pizza. He loves eating pizza, okay? He loves eating fish, but he doesn't love the fish, right? When we use the word love, most of the time we say, I love this, I love that. What we really are saying is we love ourselves. We love this because it gives us pleasure. So we use the word love in this way in many cases, and also when it comes to people. Oh, I love that person. I love that baseball player. I love that singer. And sometimes it seeps into relationships. Yeah, I love them. But when? Only when they give me pleasure. But when that pleasure starts turning into pain, okay, then the relationship bounces between pleasure and pain, love and hate, and then you have drama, and then sometimes it goes more into the pain aspect, then there's no more love. Okay, that's what happens many times. And because real love, as we will see later, actually the definition of real love, it cannot turn to anything else other than what it is. Real love cannot stop. Just like you can't stop loving your child, even if he misbehaves. Even if there's a bad situation, he got kicked out of school, even though he's not living up to his responsibilities, you can't stop loving your child, right? What's the difference then? So this first state of love, that selfish love, is what we call egoic love. Now, it's not something bad about the love, it's the person. The person who lives life in what's called the egoic state. The egoic state means that the person sees himself as a separate entity, sees himself as something on their own. And there's me, and there's you, right? If you see yourself as something separate than other people, right? You're living in the egoic state, you haven't transcended that. It'll go into your relationships as well. It's you, it's him and I. And sometimes we're against, sometimes we're on the same page. But you're living life through the egoic state. And when you live life through the egoic state, your love is going to be selfish love too, because that's how you live your entire life. This concept of egoic state basically just means that you see yourself, your sense of self is as a separate entity. King Solomon said it best. He says two verses that seem to contradict each other in the book of Proverbs. One time he speaks about marriage and he says, I'm going to say it in Hebrew and I'll translate. He says, Matzah isha, matzah tov. A woman who found a woman, like marriage, found something good. And in another verse he says, Motze ani mar mimavet et isha. I find the woman, he means marriage, bitter than death. So he says two contradictory things. One time he says it's good, one time he says it's bitter than death in the same book. So what's pshat? Pshat means what's the answer? The answer is, where's the one word between these two verses is the word ani. Ani means I. When he says motze ani et ha'isha, when I find the woman, in Hebrew it's different because of the way it's written. The word I, ani, comes before the woman, then it's bitter than death. In other words, if you're looking at marriage through the egoic state of mind, the selfish state of mind, and you're not looking to find the other person, but you're looking to find your needs through the other person, then it's bitter than death. Because the two people are basically, their marriages, if they fulfill each other's needs. That's all it is. So when you're looking for the I, then it's bitter than death. It's ani. But if you're finding the other person and you're connecting to the other person, not to you, through the other person, then it's bliss. So really the first type of love that exists in most cases is this first, what's called selfish type of love, where we're looking for someone who's going to be good for us. Now I'm not saying don't take this approach. I'm not saying that this is not the natural thing. Obviously we want someone who's good for us. We're not looking for someone who's bad for us. But what I am saying is this, if everything stays at this level of the egoic state of love, let's call like a very, very premature level of love, and doesn't transcend this level, then it's susceptible to harm because things don't stay the same. Your needs change and the other person changes, and therefore this love can quickly turn to dislike and to distaste and cannot be relied upon. And by the way, people who don't get divorced, it doesn't mean they're happy. Many people who stay married unhappily just because they think they'll be more unhappy if they get divorced, because it's very, very very costly to get divorced, both financially, emotionally, and in every. So they live their own lives. But the problem in many marriages is the love never really transcended this selfish type of love, which is just basically, you give me what I need, I give you what you need. You have what I want, you have what I want, I have what you want. So this selfish type of love is a love that can easily turn, and in many cases, that's why many couples just don't last, because they haven't transcended that. What is real love? Real love is not selfish love. Real love is not a feeling. Real love is not an emotion. What is it then? It's a state of being. Real love is a state of being. The numerical value of the Hebrew word ahava, which means love, is 13. The same numerical value of the Hebrew word echad, 1. Meaning love is a state of being. It's a state of oneness. It's a state when two people are connected to each other and submerged to each other so much that just like when you feel your pain on your right arm, when you cut yourself, you feel it all over the body. You're not going to cut yourself, as the Talmud says, if someone cut himself by mistake on the right arm, he's not going to cut himself on his left arm. That doesn't make any sense, right? But in marriage, oh, you did this to me, I'll show you. There's revenge, there's fights, there's conflict. When you have conflict and you try to hurt each other, you obviously don't see yourself as one, because you see yourself as two separate entities, right? So there's conflict, there's fights, right? But if you are connected, if you had one, if one person hurt the other person, the other person should not be seeking to hurt the other person, because that's like there's already two hurts being going on. It's like one entity. So the real definition of love is a state of connectedness. Where do we see this in the Torah? Well, in the story of creation, we see that the only beings that were created from one another are man and woman. Like God created male and female from all the animals, but when he got to man, he created one creature and he separated the woman from the man. This was something different that he hadn't done so far. Why would God not create man from one source and a woman from a different source like he did with all the other creatures? One reason is the other creatures, there's no such thing as love. They just use each other for procreation, instinctually, and they mate and they separate. Did you guys know that animals don't have lust? They don't get together unless they're going to bring kids. Animals don't. I never knew that. Yeah, so now you know.
Rabbi?
What?
Even dogs?
Even dogs. There's no such thing as dogs saying, let's go have fun tonight, it's like, or something, let's go meet someone or something. They don't. Only humans have this, right? Because animals can't develop an intimate relationship. They can't become one. This is just a biological need. They get together when there's a need, and they don't when there's no need. But humans are not. Humans need like a deeper relationship. They have like a spiritual, even call it, need to form oneness. And they feel incomplete. By the way, it doesn't mean that if you just meet anyone, it's going to make you more complete in life. This is what the big mistakes people make. People think that, oh, my life is horrible, but when I meet that right person, my life is going to be whole and complete. Guess what? Huge mistake. If you don't feel good when with yourself, then when another person comes into your life, you're not going to necessarily feel more whole. It's just going to change. You'll still have a dysfunction, but now it'll be a different type of dysfunction. But in any case, in general, yes, the other person, you feel a need to be with another person, and you feel incomplete without another person. And that's because man was created from one entity and split into two. And therefore, only when they're one, they come back to their home. And that's what love is. Love is a state of oneness. It's not just a feeling. It's not a mental state. It's not an emotion. It's really being fully connected to the other person. And when you're one with the other person, that's something that is eternal. It's not something that can easily turn to hate. Just like you can't hate yourself. I mean, you can hate yourself, but it's harder to hate yourself than, to hate another person, because you don't, am I crazy? I hate myself. I am myself. I can't hate myself, right? So when you see the other person as a part of you so much, you can't treat them bad, really. When you step out of that and, there's a disconnection, then, you're already out of that state of oneness, and yeah, you could hurt the other person. But in a state of oneness, in a state of love, if you really reach that level, it's very hard to separate, and that love should turn into hate. Just doesn't happen so much. Yeah, there's a story about Rav Aryeh Levine. He was 80 years old. He's a big rabbi, lived a long time ago in Israel. And one time he and his wife came to the doctor, and the doctor said, how can I help you? And he said, our leg hurts. His wife's leg hurt, right? Now that's a state of two people who are really connected. That one person really feels the other person's pain as if it were their own pain, right? That's a state of love. So selfish love is When the person gives me pleasure, I love them. When they don't, I don't. And real love, it has nothing to do with that person and, whether they give you a lot of pleasure now. You're connected to them, you're one with them, and you, when it's bad for them, it's bad for you. You don't see yourself, oh, they're like a source of pain in my life. You see, like, it's my pain, not their pain, and now it's like ruining my life, but it's my pain as well. That's a state of love. And that's something that you really have to work to get to. It's not something you fall into. This thing of falling in love, it must be some type of a Greek invention of like the Cupid, because that's like saying you don't do anything and you just happens. You believe that can happen? It could just happen? Does it just happen? Liz, it happens? You think so? Maybe. Just like suddenly you start loving someone? I don't know. Call me pessimist. I don't know. Yeah, you have to work. You have to work for it. So these two types of love are actually mentioned in the Mishnah in chapters of the Fathers, and I'm going to read the Mishnah to you in each. The Mishnah says, any love which is dependent on something, when the something ceases, the love ceases. Any love which is not dependent on anything will never cease. What is the love which is dependent? The love of Amnon and Tamar. And which is not dependent? The love of David and Jonathan. So, does anyone know here who Amnon and Tamar were? No. All right, that's what I'm here for. Amnon and Tamar were like half brothers and sisters. King David had, multiple wives, and because, he could afford it. And Amnon and Tamar, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not. Amnon was a son of David from one woman, and Tamar was a daughter from another woman. And Amnon was like, she was beautiful, and he was like infatuated with his half-sister. But he knew he couldn't marry her because she's his half-sister. So anyways, he was like lovesick all the time. He was always thinking about her, and he was depressed until one day his friend said, what's the matter with you? Why are you, why don't you act like a man? He said, what can I do? He said, I'll help you. I'll, pretend that you're sick. Ask for her to deliver you some soup, and then I will lock the door, and then you could do the rest. And that's what happened. Now, this guy's been like lovesick for this girl for I don't know how long, but he did what he did, and it says like moments later, he like couldn't look at her, and he's like he like wanted her out of his sight, and it says that the hate or the whatever the disgust that he had was greater than the love that he had beforehand. And the Mishnah uses this as what's called selfish love. This is a type of selfish love. Obviously, this is very extreme, but a love that turns to hate, it's a sign that it's a selfish love. It's meaning that the person only liked the other person because they give him some type of gratification and fulfillment. When that disappeared, no love, nothing is left. It's horrible. And this happens many times. Many times you see people living together, could be 10, 15 years. The coldness with which the marriage ends or the relationship ends in a short amount of time doesn't make any sense. It's like a person who you lived with a long time, right? How can you treat them so coldly? Throw them out of the house or whatever, treat them as worse than strangers. How could that be? You don't treat anyone who was close to you like that. Why that person? The pshat is that it was a selfish love. And when, that pleasure turned to pain, now they're a source of pain in your life, and it's no different than the love, it's just now pain. It was never love to begin with, right? So if you treat someone bad that you once loved, pretty good chance that you never really had good love there. You really never had love to begin with, because love can't turn to hate. Now, where do we see it? In the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, a love which is not dependent on anything will never cease. Now, what does that mean? Charlene, what's a love that's not dependent on anything? Then what does it make it? What makes it love? Can a love be not dependent on anything? So the Mishnah tells us the answer. Yes. The love of David and Jonathan, but they weren't, they were just friends, right? There wasn't, don't think that David and Jonathan were, they were friends, but they had an eternal love. Why? What made them love? And you should know, they came from completely different backgrounds, and their situation actually would have it that they would not be friends. Yet they were friends. The love in David and Jonathan was eternal because their love was like, they were both pursuing the same common values. In spirituality, closeness is not like in physical terminology. In physical terminology, you say when two things are close is when they're like physically close. You call them close. But in spirituality, closeness is determined by what? How do you say two people are like close to each other if they're not physically close? Who would you call two people who are very close?
Holistically close?
What is that word?
Like holiness, like kind of.
Oh, holy. What does that mean?
Like
Spiritual.
Spiritual, exactly.
Now, I'm asking, what does that mean, close?
They're on the same frequency. They're on the same page.
Same
Agree
mindset.
on, same mindset.
Oh, so the word is resemblance. When Torah says that you should be close to God. How do you get close to God? God is an infinite being. You can't even fathom God. Even saying the word, it does injustice because it makes all these mental images of God, of someone with like a beard or someone who's, whoever. How do you get close to God? So the sages say, emulate God. Be like God. Act in the same ways as God. That means you're close to God. When two people are the same in terms of their values and their commitment to values, they get close to each other. And that's a love that doesn't depend on anything. It's not that they need each other. They don't need each other. Whenever you have a neediness and you're dependent on the other person and you need them, of course you do need them. But the love cannot be dependent on your needing them. Because when you need them, that's again selfish. And that's a love that depends on something. And that something may change. It's not going to always stay the same. But a love that comes from closeness because you guys are like similar in the spiritual sense, you're committed to the same values and the common good, you become like closer to each other. So that love is eternal, unshakable, and that love cannot cease to be because it's a state. It's a state of being. It's not just like a need.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I have questions. So then when you're looking for a mate, like to marry, what do you look, because you're looking, say like you're looking for someone and like you want to be married, you want to have kids, that's depending on someone for something.
Well, you need
Like,
to
you
find...
need a man to be married, you need a man to have kids, and
So what are you asking? That's like
So
needing
is it
them?
not depending on someone?
Well, finding someone with similar values as yours, that's different than... I see what you're saying. Where's the line between needing them?
Like a lot of people get married because they know they need to get married and they know they have to have kids. They want to get married.
They want to have a family.
They want to have a family. A lot of people don't necessarily care who the other guy is as much as wanting to have a family. It's needing someone for that purpose.
So that's definitely not
No, it's not good.
good.
It's crazy.
But isn't that also needing?
So what's transcending the need? You're asking like what's transcending the need? Okay, that's a good question.
Or guys, whatever, they want to get married and they want to have a family, they want to have kids. They need the other person to do that.
Of course. Yeah, and some people say that, if I want a big family, they don't want a big family, problem. So you're asking what transcends the need, like
you need the person.
to cooperate.
No, like, I need to marry a man. To,
Of
like,
course.
have kids and whatever, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's important to, like, but that's me needing him.
The fact that she needs a guy, that's a need.
That's a need.
I think you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, it's after that, like beyond that, once you've like found the person maybe, then what needs should you have? And you're saying you should have no needs. Like once you've found that
Yeah, but
person.
that's not humanly possible.
Right. So we are human, and we are living in, the egoic state.
Makes sense.
Right. So I think Sharona kind of answered is like in the beginning stages, and not only in the beginning stages, there are mutual needs that need to be met. Okay? But all I'm saying is it can't stay just there. Obviously, even if you reach the ultimate level of oneness, you have needs. You're not Mother Teresa, right? And if the other person says, listen, I feel like taking 2 years off, and, I'll come back to you, and no, okay, that's unacceptable, right? You do have needs, but I'm saying it doesn't stop just there, that it's just based on fulfillment of mutual needs.
So it starts there.
It only could start there, but it can't end there. It's like as if, it's as if a little kid, you try to, encourage them to do well in school, so you have to offer them some type of, incentive to, but the incentive is not the goal. The goal is that they engage themselves, in learning. So same thing, the mutual needs things will connect you. There will be a connection, but it'll be on a selfish level. It can't stop there. It has to transcend it and go higher. But when you're on that higher level, those two people are so close that even on the level of the egoic, the need, let's say one person, they want to be intimate and the other person doesn't. It's a huge problem in many relationships. So one person is like craving for intimacy and the other person is denying it or withholding and saying, I don't feel like it. I don't mean just like for a week. I mean like it could be like months, 6 months. Okay? So wait a second. So what's expected of the other person? Just say, well, I should love them and they should, I should respect their decision. In that level, the two people, if they can't see the misery of this, if one can't feel the pain of the other one, both sides, that feels that they're not so connected. Okay? Usually there is a balance that you feel the other person's needs and it becomes like your need. You become so identified with them, you can't see them suffer. Right? But when you're in the egoic state, okay, then your needs matter. Let that person wait. That person, you're first.
I think what we're all trying to get at is that there's a difference between need and dependency. As a human being, we all have needs. We all need certain things to survive. We need certain things to keep you motivated. We all need certain things, but I think it's the dependency which is where the problem lies. Like, you can't marry someone and expect for your all happiness to depend on them. Like, that person, or you can't go into marriage depending on that person, or saying like I need them to fulfill all my financial needs, or all, like, it can't be the end all be all. I think that's what we're getting at. Am I wrong? Right?
But in the ketubah, basically the guy is writing off that he's going to support financially and everything possible.
Right,
But he didn't say a fur coat.
No, but he's right.
Yeah.
In the ketubah it says
No,
that.
because this is
The girl doesn't sign the ketubah.
the guy is signing the ketubah.
The guy is signing a contract, and he's bounded by that.
Well, it's all within. It's all within.
Signing a contract.
Yeah, but that doesn't require him to, more than, what's considered sane and normal.
No, but
But what's sane and normal nowadays, Rabbi?
Okay, that's depends
How do we
on.
define
Standard, Rabbi,
That
sorry.
depends on.
No,
The
they-
girls don't sign the contract, the ketubah, so they're not obligated, but guys are.
No, definitely, guys have to provide. No, the question is, to their best extent.
But it doesn't say. in the
Well,
far right into the best of its
It doesn't say a lot of things, but we don't we can just go by what it says.
You leave it be.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. Dependency is not good. But yeah, the main idea here is that it needs to be more than just when that person is a source of pleasure to you. The goal is love is actually a goal. It's something in the making. It's not something that is built within 1 year. It's not something that happens the next day. It's something that takes a long time. But once you get to it, it's something that's unshakable.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Sorry. So, one, how come most people don't reach that level? One, because most people don't, like, they'll be married for their whole lives and they'll be like, I hate you, you stupid, like, whatever.
Yeah, it's not very reassuring.
But then there's, sorry. And then the other one is, how do you build love? I don't understand.
That's our next point. It's basically not just transcending, it's transcending yourself. Okay? The reason why God put us in this institute of marriage is because only through marriage you can really transcend the self. Because when you don't have someone to get along with that forces you to actually, the person could be a source of suffering, right, to you, or pleasure, right? It depends if you stay on the selfish level. If you stay on the selfish level, it is almost on, how do you say, like, it's destined to have a lot of conflict if you stay on the selfish level. But that suffering is actually a gift, because that forces you to look inside and say, wait a second, how do we make it work? Okay, you're supposed to say, wait a second, something is dysfunctional here. There's dysfunction going on. That's supposed to be like an awakening for you. It's a gift, right? If you didn't have that, you could live your whole life, not change, not transcend yourself, just stay in your little cube, in your little cave. But when you have dysfunction, something is not functioning. That means if it's not functioning, something isn't right. And usually it's me. And it's them too, right? But you're here to help them, not like it's your fault, help them. But in other words, you see that both of you guys are not getting along, so you have to take a step back, and then you have to get guidance, and then you have to see how am I contributing to the dysfunction, and how are they contributing to the dysfunction, and let's grow. That's the process of growth. You can't grow unless there's dysfunction first. It can't just be like this. It's more like this. So if you go like this, and sometimes there's a big thing, and and it sets you back, you have to understand, no, this is part of growing, is actually getting a little bit of, Sure.
Off topic. They say that, when you're single and you meet soulmate, you become one. But so many people in this world, so many don't get along and the marriages fail. So are we really...
So soulmate doesn't mean that you're going to get along.
That's what I mean.
Soulmate means that simply you guys have been put together and that you guys were meant to get married. It doesn't mean that you were meant to stay married. Okay, that's why I said to meeting. That's the easier part.
It's a marriage mate.
I mean, they call it soulmate. It sounds better. You can call it marriage mate. It sounds boring.
You're meant to be together for the rest of your lives.
Not necessarily. No, you could not even meet. You could even reject that person. It doesn't mean you're even going to get married. It just means that this was your potential, someone who was supposed to be your spouse.
Don't you think some people were meant to be with other people and they would have been happier?
Could be. We never know. We never know till it happens. Yeah.
Quick question. There are some my friends' parents that they're not married, but they have 3 children together. So, for example, there was this person, people from Rome. I'm from Milan, and she was from Rome.
Just don't say their names, yeah?
Oh, yeah,
okay.
of course,
yes,
no.
yeah.
And she had 2 last names. So I asked her why they have 2 last names, and she's like, yeah, my parents are not married. What do you mean they're not married? It's yeah, we're 3 siblings, and they're still not married.
Okay.
So my question is, the real point is even if you're not married, what do you say if you have children?
What are you're asking if...
Yeah, let's say, for example, somebody doesn't want to get married, and he's yeah, I'm going to have children, and that's it. So what does the Torah say? Let's say somebody's
I mean, it's better to have children than not have children, if you ask me. But it's not like ideal, good for the children. It's like the whole family structure is, more than just bringing children. It's like a family. I think if you don't have marriage, you're missing part of the family dynamic.
Yeah, but they're still like living in the same house.
Yeah.
The
They
father
just
still-
don't have a ketubah. That's what I'm
Exactly.
saying.
No, the ketubah is not so much this. It's basically if there's a real commitment there. I mean, if the kids don't know what's going on, so as far as the kids are concerned, but I don't know. Yeah, it's a tough question. It's an interesting question. It's
Tricky question. Sorry, but like.
yeah, it's not. It's. Something smells not good about it. I can't put the finger on it yet. Yeah.
Do you think that, albeit with, high levels of mutual respect and relatively similar values, any two people could really truly make a marriage partnership work?
Almost. I think this goes back to what Charlene was asking. How do you look for a partner? I think you need to look for someone who is basically normal, meaning normal that the person doesn't have like major issues with their anger, or a person who's very scarred inside, that has like a fear of abandonment, many different things inside that can later come out. But if you take two people who are both relaxed, patient, accepting, and again they can work with you, it should work. That's what I think the Rambam says, that really almost any two people, because again, dysfunction doesn't come necessarily from incompatibility, but it comes from many different other reasons. One of them is like not accepting the other person, and then just saying, we're not, But there is a level of, obviously similar backgrounds make it easier. Sometimes when people are too different, come from way too different backgrounds, and the behavior and the conditioned mind from each culture can make it more difficult. Like when it comes to like respect or women's gender, men's gender, women's role, men's role, it can make it definitely harder. That's for sure. Now, how to transcend love? Through giving. Now, giving is a big concept. It's not just giving things. Giving is how you act towards somebody else. Okay? When we talk about love, we cannot control maybe how we feel, but we can control how we act. Okay? The Torah says that you should love God. This is one of the most famous questions. How does the Torah command a person to love God? Love is, we thought, is a feeling. You can't control, I love God. If you don't feel like the love, then you don't love Him. How could the Torah expect you to love God? So our sages say it's not loving God in a feeling, it's doing acts of love. We know that actions you don't act in a giving way when you love, contrary to what people think. You feel love when you act in a giving way. In other words, the actions always have to come first. When you speak to someone, and you speak to them in a respectful way, right? That actually has an impact on how you feel towards them. You suddenly feel like, oh, this person is important. When you say a compliment, it makes you like them better, right? You don't say compliments when you feel like it. You have to, like, sometimes, I'm not saying you should, if someone made terrible food that the husband made the wife or vice versa, and you say, oh, this is just delicious. You don't have to make up stuff, but the things that they do, and that you are pleased, if you don't say a compliment like every day, you're not really giving that person what they need. Some people think that by giving, providing, being a provider, and giving the paycheck at the end of the month, I gave them everything they need. You know what? That doesn't work, because you are not giving. There's a paycheck, and that they're using. But are you appreciating them every day? That's giving. Giving is not just giving the material, it's giving time, attention, thought. Is this person happy? If they're in a bad mood, what can I do to lift their spirits? Am I talking to them enough? Do I care enough? So giving is actually how you transcend, and it's the only way to transcend the self And it leads you to this state of connectedness when you start giving. Now, how does it work? Rav Dessler explains it. It works because it's on a selfish level. Since a person loves themselves, or is more connected to their needs and their desires and their wishes more than anyone else's, and that's a person's nature, when a person includes another person in their life by giving to them, their ego is in the other person now. So they're still selfish like before, but now the other person has become a part of their selfishness. So it's becomes you're transcending your self-love to include another person. Ultimately, it will evolve into something else. But because you're so invested in the other person, and that person becomes a part of your life, you become connected to them. So that is why there's always, that's why Jewish law always requires spouses to do something for the other person. They may be wealthy and they can afford another person doing the cooking and the cleaning and everything else in the house, but they have to find something that they have to do for each other. It can't be that everything else is being done and no one is doing anything for each other. They have to do things for you, because without giving, without doing something for each other, you don't really feel connected to the other person. So the reason why we feel so connected to our children is because we give our children a lot. And we give them so much, and we invest our whole energy raising our children, is that we can't be separated from our children. It's just because we give them. It's not that they're because it's our children. They could be your children, and if you don't invest in your children, you don't feel connected to them, and they mean not a lot to you. It's not a biological thing. It's because you invest in them and you give them that you come to love them. So that's how you transcend the self-love into real love. It's like when you care about the other person, you do acts of love. Those acts of love have a reciprocal effect, and you come to actually love them more. So you have to do something. You have to work at it. Last thing, but not least, and this is the technical level, you could have the right approach, and you could want to reach this level of connectedness, but you also have to have skills. One of the skills, and guys need to learn this maybe more than women, is actually communication, right? To build empathy. If you don't have empathy in a relationship, and you don't know what the other person is suffering from, and if you're asked, what do you do that makes them happy, and you don't know how to answer that, or what does this person, what's their biggest fear, and you don't know how to answer that, or what are they insecure about, and you don't know how to answer that, that means you don't have empathy. Meaning empathy is being able to get in the other person's head, right? And many couples, especially those who come for counseling, right away, the first thing that you test is the level of empathy that they have. Do they know what's going on in the other person's head? Many times they don't, because people become so involved in their own life and working, especially working, they're totally disconnected from the other person. They don't even know what's going on. They know that there's issues, but they don't know really what's going on in the other person's life.
Yeah, but women are difficult to understand.
Wait a second.
No, I say by myself. I don't speak on behalf of them.
Let me flip it around. Guys are harder to teach. Yeah, I just flipped it around. In other words, rather than girls are hard to understand, is guys, it's hard for them to learn how to communicate. And that is true. Guys are not big communicators. Guys,
things. We either want to eat or either want to sleep.
Hey,
there is nothing else.
No. Okay, there's a lot more than eating sleep. Guys, that is the thing that guys need to learn, how to not just listen, but to be able to be connected to their spouse emotionally. And that takes work, because this is actually why men and women perfect each other. One of the things that guys have in them that needs to be strengthened through the relationship is, being in touch, having emotional intelligence. Because guys, their instincts are all about doing and getting results, and not about feeling. Guys can't feel. I'm still in training. I can't train if I'm trained. No, your spouse you're supposed to ask them, how am I? Is that okay? How's it going? It's a communicating. It's in general things okay with me and you? You talk. You talk. No, and then and then you see why are you feeling? It's really paying attention, being attentive, and talking,
But Rabbi,
not being
But
disconnected
sometimes
and
women,
like.
they say yes and they mean no. They say no, they mean yes. I promise you.
but Rabbi,
That's what you got to learn. You have to learn when the yes means no
For example,
and
you
what
ask
is.
her, "When you mean, do you agree?" She's like, no. And I'm like, what? No. With the head, yes, and with saying no. So I was confused. I was
and,
like,
and
what's
another
going on?
thing,
Welcome to it. It's okay.
and another thing, Rabbi, when you're coming and asking this girl that you want to marry, hey, what do you think about me? Like, if
No,
you-
not when you want to win. After. You have to understand. There's no such thing as building a real relationship and love before marriage. I know it sounds like very backward, but I'm telling you, the thing is because when there's no commitment between two people, they act totally different.
So how
Okay,
do you
everything
know?
changes.
How
How do we know this?
That's
Here,
the
this
way
is
you
something
have
that
to
I.
figure out.
This is something that is. The Torah states. One second. I just have to read this first because I.
Marriage is the ultimate commitment. There's relationships these days. People date. There's friendships between a man and woman.
Mhm.
You know, you say, and with all due respect, you say it's only about marriage. I don't agree.
I didn't say it's all that. I said you can't have love.
Respect in different relationships, in work relationships,
Of course.
in friendships.
Of
in
course,
dating.
of course. No, I didn't mean to say. All I
Marriage.
meant to say is that you can't really build love. I mean, like man and woman love outside of marriage. Yeah, and
Why not?
oh,
The true color.
first of all,
There's some people that are in serious relationships that.
relationships that don't entail a real commitment can never lead to real love. Only selfish love, because it's not for keeps. Anyone could walk out, and therefore everyone is on their best behavior. That's the simple reason. That's why you could see people who date 5 years and after less than a year of marriage get divorced. What happened? They were together for 5 years. Oh, because there was no commitment. After there's a commitment, people change.
Maybe people should just think that preface.
Maybe they should. I don't know. I'm not, I don't want to encourage anyone to do anything that is, but it's not going to fix anything, that's for sure. The Torah states that after Isaac was introduced to his wife, never seen her before, Rivka, he heard about her, and it says he married Rebekah and she became his wife. No, she became his wife and he loved her. The love came afterwards, not before. I mean, obviously, technically, he didn't have girlfriends back then, but the idea is that when you have marriage, then the work starts. And love is not just a feeling, it's a goal. You have to remember that. That's why it's like as long as two people are committed to that goal, then they will reach it. Love is not just being, it's wanting to be. It's a huge thing. It's an ideal. Now, when you have an ideal and both people are committed to it, they'll also be committed to reach it and to do what it requires to reach it, i.e. compromise, i.e. work on their character, i.e. be sensitive to the other person, be more flexible, because they're committed to reaching that level. As if they don't have it as a goal, well, if it's just like, oh, if I have it, then nice, if I don't, it doesn't work, I'm walking out, then they won't work at it. If it doesn't work, just switch. That's the attitude. But when you get into marriage, you actually take a vow not only to love this person, but to want to love them, even though right now it's not happening. And that makes it, like when you have two people making that commitment, it's a lot easier than if you don't. Because if you don't, who's to say that it's going to work? When the things get tough, who's to say that it's going to last? But if you're committed to wanting to love, then it's already an ideal, as long as the commitment is sincere. And so both people do what it takes in order to reach it. I don't think anyone reaches it like easily. People aren't easy to deal with. But when you work at it, you reach it. So I want to, wish everyone that, that this should be a goal, and that, you should always, remember that it's not something that's easily, but it's very attainable, and that you shouldn't settle for anything less, and that you should find a partner who shares, an awareness and is capable of, if this is something that's, is capable of, wanting to pursue something like this, because when you reach it, it's something that, like King Solomon says, it's tov, it's good, and and you feel like home. And that's what we ultimately want to look for in a relationship, a feeling of home, of like, oh, I can't wait to be with that person. Not dependent on it, but it's like you feel like it's a real connection is made. All right, sure. Enjoy the food, please.